The death of the knight. The English longbow at Agincourt 1415. In the mud-soaked fields of northern France on October 25, 1415. The fundamental laws of warfare were broken. For over a century, the battlefield had been dominated by one figure, the mounted knight, encased in head-to-toe plate armor atop a massive warhorse. The knight was the 15th century equivalent of an armored tank, a symbol of power, wealth, and seemingly invincible military technology. The French army at the Battle of Agincourt was the very definition of this power. They fielded tens of thousands of these tanks, bristling with steel, confident that their charge would annihilate the small, exhausted, and sick English army that stood in their way. But the English, led by King Henry V, possessed a game-changer. It was not a complex machine. It was not made of steel. It was a simple 6-foot piece of wood, drawn from a single yew tree. Yet, in the hands of a trained yeoman, the English longbow was about to render 1,000 years of military doctrine obsolete. The Battle of Agincourt is not just a story of English victory. It is the story of a technological disruption. The French relied on the shock and awe of the heavy cavalry charge, a strategy that had dominated Europe for generations. Their nobility believed war was a personal, chivalric contest. The English, out of necessity, embraced a different philosophy: mass-ranged lethality. The genius of the English longbow system was threefold. First, the weapon itself. The yew longbow was a natural laminate, combining the flexibility of sapwood with the compressive strength of heartwood, creating a devastatingly powerful spring. With draw weights exceeding 150 pounds, 3 times that of a modern hunting bout, was a weapon of immense kinetic energy. Second, the ammunition. The English employed the bodkin arrowhead. This was not the broadhead used for hunting. The bodkin was a long, thin, square-sectioned spike of hardened iron, designed for one purpose: to punch through steel plate. It was a specialized armor-piercing round. Third, and most crucial, was the software, the user. A longbowman was not trained in a year. He was a product of a lifetime of mandatory practice, a law enforced in England. This created a professional class of soldiers capable of unleashing a terrifying rate of fire. A trained longbowman could accurately fire 10, perhaps 12, arrows per minute. An army of 5,000 longbowmen could, therefore, release nearly 1,000 arrows every second. This was the force that met the French charge at Agincourt. Henry V chose his ground brilliantly. He positioned his army in a narrow gap between 2 dense forests, funneling the massive French army into a bottleneck. The field, recently plowed and soaked by days of rain, became a quagmire of deep, sucking mud. As the first French wave of knights advanced, they were not met with a duel. They were met with an industrial-scale slaughter. The English unleashed the arrow storm. Survivors described the sky turning black. The bodkin points, driven by 150 pounds of force, found gaps in armor, pierced visors, and penetrated steel plate at close range. The sound was not of swords clashing, but of a monstrous hailstorm hammering against thousands of metal suits. The mud and the sheer volume of arrows destroyed the French charge before it ever reached the English line. Horses, wounded and panicking, fell, crushing their riders. Knights who fell into the mud, weighed down by 50 pounds of armor, were unable to get up and drowned. The subsequent French waves, forced to climb over the pile of their own dead and dying, simply added to the carnage. When the arrows ran out, the English yeomen, lightly armored, equipped with hammers, axes, and daggers advanced state. They were not knights. They were butchers. They moved through the immobilized, suffocating mass of French nobility and finished the job. By the end of the day, the aristocracy of France had been effectively erased. The English longbow, a simple piece of yew, had proven that a trained common man could kill a knight from 200 yards away. It shattered the myth of the knight's invincibility and, in doing so, ended the age of chivalric warfare. Agincourt was the bloody birth of a new era where technology and tactics, not just birthright and steel, would define the battlefield. The end of walls, gunpowder, and the fall of Constantinople 1453. For 1,000 years, the city of Constantinople stood as the most formidable fortress on earth. It was the jewel of the Byzantine Empire, the queen of cities, and the inheritor of Roman glory. Its defenses were not just walls, they were a masterpiece of military engineering, an impossible problem that had broken sieges and shattered armies for a millennium. The Theodosian Walls, a complex, multi-layered system of moats, outer walls, inner walls, and massive towers, were the pinnacle of pre-modern defense technology. They represented an idea that a city could be so well fortified it was, in effect, eternal. In 1453, a 21-year-old Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed II, arrived with an army and an idea that would bring that eternity to a violent end. He understood what the defenders did not, that the old rules of warfare were dead. The game had already been changed by a new, dirty, and ferociously powerful technology, gunpowder. The fall of Constantinople is the defining moment when the age of fortification died and the age of artillery was born. The city's defenders, led by the last Byzantine emperor, Constantine She, trusted in their stone, their height, and their history. They knew how to repel men with ladders, siege towers, and catapults. What they were about to face was not a traditional siege. It was a revolution. Mehmed's game changer was not just a cannon. It was a monster. He had commissioned a Hungarian engineer named Orban to build a weapon so large it defied imagination. The Basilic, as it was later known, was a super cannon over 27 feet long, forged in bronze, and capable of firing a 1,200-pound stone ball over a mile. This was not a weapon designed to harass defenders on a wall. It was a weapon designed to erase the wall itself. The logistical challenge of the Basilic was almost as impressive as its power. It took 60 oxen and hundreds of men just to move it. It could only be fired 3 times a day, taking hours to cool and reload. But this slow, deliberate pace became the siege's terrifying psychological drumbeat. The siege began on April 6, 1453. The defenders, massively outnumbered, watched as the Ottomans unleashed a new kind of war. The old siege engines, like trebuchets, threw projectiles in a high arc, doing minimal damage to the Theodosian Wall's foundations. Mehmed's cannons, however, fired in a flat, devastating trajectory. The impact of the 1,200-pound stone balls was not a mere strike. It was an earthquake. Chroniclers wrote that the very ground shook for miles. The sound was a thunderclap that shattered the morale of the defenders. Where the balls struck, the eternal walls did not just chip, they disintegrated. Stone that had stood since the 5th century was pulverized into dust. The psychological impact was profound. The walls were not just a physical defense, they were the city's identity. And now, they were being systematically deleted. The Byzantine defenders, demonstrating incredible courage, fought back. Every night, under the cover of darkness, they would rush to the breaches, attempting to repair the massive holes with rubble, wood, and earth. But it was a futile race against technology. What had taken 1,000 years to build could be destroyed in a morning. The true genius of Mehmed's strategy was his relentless application of this new technology. He didn't just have one super cannon, he had an entire orchestra of smaller, more mobile cannons that maintained a constant 24/7 bombardment, preventing the defenders from sleeping, repairing, or regrouping. He used gunpowder to break the city's legendary sea chain and even hauled his ships over land, using log rollers to bypass the Byzantine navy. On May 29th, after 53 days of relentless bombardment, the walls were a ruin. The Basilic and its smaller brethren had done their job. They had punched a hole wide enough for the Ottoman janissaries to pour through. the city fell. The news that rippled across Europe was not just that a city had fallen, but that the city had fallen. It was a technological shockwave. The fall of Constantinople proved, unequivocally, that no wall on earth, no matter how thick or tall, could stand against the power of gunpowder. The age of the castle was over. The knight in shining armor, already rendered vulnerable by the longbow, was now completely obsolete, his fortress home reduced to a target. A new era of warfare had begun, an era defined not by stone and steel, but by chemical fire and explosive force. The steel Leviathan, the ironclad ship, and the end of wooden navies 1862. For centuries, naval power had been defined by wood, canvas, and cannon. The world's great maritime empires, Spain, France, and above all, Britain, had built their global dominance on the ship of the line. These were floating wooden fortresses bristling with up to 120 guns, capable of exchanging devastating broadsides. Naval battles were magnificent, chaotic affairs decided by the weight of timber and the proficiency of the sailors handling sail and powder. This tradition reached its zenith at Trafalgar, a testament to the wooden fighting ship's mastery. Yet, in the span of a single afternoon during the American Civil War, this entire proud history was rendered utterly obsolete. The technological death blow to the wooden navy was delivered not by a European power, but by an internal American conflict that became a laboratory for future warfare. The catalyst was a simple yet terrifying innovation: armor plating combined with steam power. This was the birth of the ironclad. The confrontation that sealed the fate of wood occurred on March 9, 1862, in Hampton Roads, Virginia. The Confederate Navy, desperate to break the Union blockade, deployed the CSS Virginia, a repurposed, heavily armored Union frigate named Merrimac. The Virginia was a monstrous oddity, a floating, iron-plated shed built on a wooden hull. It was slow, cumbersome, and ugly, but it was immune to the weapons of the past. The day before the confrontation, the Virginia single-handedly destroyed two large Union wooden warships, the USS Cumberland and the USS Congress. Cannonballs simply bounced off the Virginia's sloped armor like pebbles. The wooden vessels, despite pouring broadsides into the Iron Giant, were helpless. The Union sailors watched in horror as their shells, the very projectiles that had won global empires, could not scratch the paint of this new threat. It was a technological annihilation, a demonstration that the laws of physics on the sea had fundamentally changed. But the Union had its own game-changer ready, the USS Monitor. Designed by the brilliant Swedish engineer John Ericsson, the Monitor looked nothing like any warship ever built. It was a low, flat raft with almost no freeboard, its most prominent feature being a cylindrical, rotating armored turret housing two large Dahlgren guns. It was, in essence, a fully armored, submerged gun platform. The Battle of Hampton Roads between the Virginia and the Monitor was not a glorious battle. It was a confused, slow-motion slugfest. For 4 hours, the two ironclads circled each other, pounding one another with cannonballs at close range. The Virginia's solid shot hammered the Monitor's turret, denting the iron but failing to penetrate. The Monitor's massive shells struck the Virginia's armor, shaking the vessel violently but leaving no fatal breach. The battle ended in a tactical draw. But its strategic message was catastrophic for every wooden navy in the world. A wooden ship could not destroy an iron ship. And an iron ship could not be destroyed by a wooden ship. The implications were profound. The vast multi-century investment in wooden fleets became instantly worthless. Britain, whose global power rested entirely on the supremacy of its wooden walls of oak, immediately recognized the threat. The day after the news arrived in Europe, Britain and every other major power halted all construction of wooden warships and began an immediate, frantic scramble to build their own ironclads. The ironclad ushered in a new, hyper-competitive age of naval arms races. culminating in the Dreadnought-class battleships and the massive navies of the World Wars. The defining factors of sea power shifted overnight from the quality of timber to the thickness of steel, the power of the engine, and the caliber of the gun. The ship of the line, the undisputed queen of the sea for hundreds of years, was relegated to a museum piece, sunk by a simple, undeniable truth: armor beats cannon. The Silent Hunter, the U-boat, and the total war at sea, World War I. By the beginning of the 20th century, naval warfare had reached a level of visible technological majesty. The mighty dreadnought battleship, a floating fortress bristling with immense guns and heavy armor, symbolized national power. Battles were expected to be decisive, glorious clashes between these steel giants. Yet, the first major global conflict would prove that the future of sea power belonged not to the visible behemoths, but to a small, stealthy, and deeply sinister weapon that hunted in the cold. Dark silence beneath the waves, the submarine, or in German hands, the U-boat Unterseeboot. The U-boat was the ultimate technological disruptor of World War I, rendering the vast, expensive, and tradition-bound surface fleets vulnerable to a force they could barely see, let alone fight effectively. It forced an entirely new, brutal form of warfare that targeted not just enemy navies, but the very economic lifeblood of nations. Before the war, the submarine was often dismissed as a curiosity, a fair-weather toy unworthy of serious naval investment. But the Germans, recognizing its defensive potential against the powerful British Royal Navy, perfected it. The U-boat's game-changer was the torpedo, a self-propelled, guided underwater weapon that allowed a small vessel to sink the largest battleship instantly. A 500-ton U-boat, costing a fraction of a 30,000-ton battleship, could eliminate it in seconds. This was asymmetric warfare taken to the extreme. The true revolutionary application came not against warships, but against merchant shipping. Britain, an island nation, was utterly dependent on imports of food, fuel, and war materials. Germany realized that crippling Britain's supply lines was a surer path to victory than engaging the Royal Navy's surface fleet. In February 1917, Germany launched a policy of unrestricted submarine warfare, declaring that any ship neutral or otherwise entering a designated war zone would be sunk without warning. The effect was immediate and devastating. The U-boat became the most effective terror weapon of the war. Its attacks were silent, invisible, and often left no survivors. U-boat captains quickly learned that targeting undefended merchant convoys was strategically more valuable than chasing armored battleships. During the height of the campaign, U-boats were sinking British and Allied shipping at a catastrophic rate, totaling over 8 million tons of shipping lost by the end of the war. The submarine transformed the nature of naval strategy from a chivalric contest between uniformed navies to total war. It blurred the lines between combatants and civilians, bringing the economic reality of the war directly to the dinner tables and factories of the Allied nations. The sinking of civilian vessels, most famously the RMS Lusitania in 1915 before the unrestricted policy, provoked international outcry and ultimately helped draw the United States into the conflict. The Allies were forced to scramble for counter-technologies. They rapidly developed early forms of sonar hydrophones, which allowed them to vaguely hear the submarine, and the depth charge, a weapon designed to explode at a preset depth. Most importantly, they resurrected the centuries-old convoy system, grouping merchant ships together under the armed escort of destroyers, a simple logistical defense that forced the U-boats to attack a concentration of armed ships, drastically reducing their success rate. The U-boat ultimately failed to defeat Britain, but it proved an undeniable truth: technological advantage, no matter how small or hidden, can defeat massive conventional force. It ensured that every future navy, from World War II to the Cold War, would be defined as much by its capacity to hide beneath the surface as its power to rule above it. The age of visible, glorious sea battles was replaced by the tense, invisible, and deadly game of the silent hunter. The Blitz and the beam, radar, and the end of air superiority, World War II. In the summer of 1940, Hitler's Germany stood victorious over Western Europe. The French army had collapsed, and the British Expeditionary Force had narrowly escaped annihilation at Dunkirk. The final obstacle to Nazi dominance was the island nation of Britain. The plan, codenamed Operation Sea Lion, required total air superiority over the English Channel, a task assigned to the formidable German Air Force, the Luftwaffe. The subsequent Battle of Britain was a clash of wills. But beneath the spectacular dogfights, the battle was decided by an invisible, humming technology that stripped the Luftwaffe of its most vital advantage: surprise. This game-changer was radar, or radio direction and ranging. It was not a weapon that fired bullets or dropped bombs, but a passive technology that fundamentally altered the dynamics of air war. Before radar defense was reactive, detection of an enemy bombing raid relied on human eyes, acoustic mirrors, and a slow, decentralized reporting system, meaning the defenders often had minutes, or sometimes seconds, to scramble their fighters. Britain's defensive advantage lay in the chain home, a sophisticated network of radar stations dotting the coast. This was not just a collection of antennae, it was a fully integrated detection and command system. The radar stations scanned the skies, sending back continuous real-time data on the speed, altitude, and direction of incoming German raids. This information flowed into central operations rooms, most famously at Bentley Priory, where WAF Women's Auxiliary Air Force personnel meticulously tracked the raids on large situation maps. The system provided the outnumbered Royal Air Force RAF Fighter Command with an unprecedented 20 to 30 minutes of warning. This time, advantage was the key to victory. The Luftwaffe, with its massive fleets of bombers and escort fighters, operated under the flawed assumption that the RAF's fighter strength was nearly exhausted. They relied on their ability to overwhelm the defenders through sheer numbers and by hitting targets before the defenders could react. But the chain home system allowed the RAF to break the laws of conventional engagement. 1. Economy of force. The RAF could conserve its limited number of fighters, directing squadrons precisely to the path of the incoming raids, avoiding exhausting, wasteful standing patrols. 2. Tactical superiority. RAF fighters were always ready, fully fueled, and able to gain altitude before the attack arrived, giving them the vital height advantage, the sun, and altitude in the dogfights. The Luftwaffe's pilots were puzzled and frustrated. They would reach their target zones only to find the British fighters already waiting for them, seemingly emerging from nowhere. German intelligence, tragically focused on visible assets like airfields, completely underestimated the significance of the unassuming coastal radar masts. They initially believed the masts were merely air defense communication antennae, failing to prioritize their destruction. The battle reached its climax during the Blitz, when the Luftwaffe shifted tactics to bombing London and other major cities. While destructive, this shift was a strategic error, as it took pressure off the crucial RAF airfields and command centers, which were the true keys to the defensive system. The Battle of Britain was a demonstration that information is the ultimate military force multiplier. Radar, an invisible beam of electromagnetic energy, proved more decisive than thousands of cannons and bombs. It transformed air defense from a desperate scramble into a structured, calculated scientific process. The defeat of the Luftwaffe was the first time Hitler had been denied a major objective, and it proved that technological innovation, combined with an integrated command structure, could successfully neutralize overwhelming offensive aerial power. From that point forward, no nation could hope to achieve air superiority without mastering the science of electronic detection. The end of absolute power. The atom bomb and the rise of mutually assured destruction, 1945. Through all of human history, from the Longbow to the Ironclad, war was defined by scale, strategy, and logistics. Victory was achieved by destroying the enemy's armies, occupying their territory, or crippling their economy. A nation could endure a terrible loss, suffer immense casualties, and still fight on. But on August 6, 1945, the fundamental calculus of warfare was not just redefined, was annihilated. With a single blinding flash over Hiroshima, humanity entered an entirely new, terrifying era where the power to destroy a civilization became concentrated into a single device. The atomic bomb was the ultimate game changer. It was a technological leap so vast it transcended conventional military utility and forced a philosophical paradigm shift. The concept of mutually assured destruction, MAD. The Manhattan Project, the top-secret, monumental scientific effort that birthed the atomic age, was a desperate race against time and theoretical possibility. Scientists grappling with the secrets of the atom harnessed the immense power stored within the nucleus through the rapid fission of uranium-235 and plutonium. When the bomb, nicknamed Little Boy, was dropped on Hiroshima, it unleashed a blast equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT. The results were catastrophic, but the strategic implication was even more profound. For the first time, a single aircraft carrying a single bomb could utterly destroy an entire city and its population in a matter of seconds. All the conventional defenses of World War II radar, anti-aircraft guns, fighter interceptors, and underground bunkers were rendered moot. The bomb did not merely bypass defenses, it made defense impossible. The immediate aftermath was the Cold War, defined entirely by the pursuit and stockpiling of these new weapons. The United States' brief monopoly on the bomb ended in 1949 when the Soviet Union successfully tested its own atomic device. This moment, the realization that two hostile superpowers now possessed the means to end each other's existence, was the true technological revolution. This led directly to the doctrine of MAD. MAD was not a peace treaty. It was a psychological deterrence based on fear and logic. It held that any attack by one side would guarantee a retaliatory strike that would result in the complete skew and total destruction of both nations and potentially all life on Earth. War between superpowers was no longer a viable option because the cost of defeat became indistinguishable from the cost of victory. The atom bomb fundamentally changed the role of the soldier and the general. Conventional warfare, while still practiced in proxy conflicts, became secondary. The primary focus of global strategy shifted to deterrence, the constant, tense, and silent preparation to not fight. Resources were poured into the development of intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, nuclear submarines, the ultimate hidden launch platform, and early warning systems, all designed to guarantee that the retaliatory strike could never be stopped. The ultimate paradoxical legacy of the atomic bomb is that the weapon designed for maximum destruction may have actually prevented the most devastating wars. It ended the era where absolute military power guaranteed national safety. Instead, the greatest technological innovation of the 20th century taught the world that true power now lay in restraint. Because possessing the ultimate weapon meant that total war was no longer about winning. It was about not losing everything. The algorithmic battlefield, drones, cyber warfare, and the age of the machine soldier 21st century. Following the existential threat posed by the atomic bomb, the 21st century introduced a quieter, more insidious revolution that shifted the battlefield from physical trenches and visible fleets to invisible networks and remote command centers. This is the age of the algorithmic battlefield, where warfare is defined not by massed infantry or industrial production, but by data processing, satellite links, and the dispassionate logic of the machine. The defining game changer of this era is the unmanned aerial vehicle UAV, or drone. The drone perfected the concept of the longbow, the U-boat, and the radar system, combining them all into a single, lethal, remotely piloted unit. Drones allow a soldier to strike an enemy with precision from thousands of miles away, eliminating the risk to the operator and simultaneously providing constant, high-resolution surveilling, the ultimate form of persistent intelligence. The drone redefined risk. It created a situation of asymmetric risk, where one side can engage in lethal force with zero danger to its personnel, while the other side faces constant, unseen threat. This disparity fundamentally changed the psychology of conflict, enabling powers to prosecute long-targeted wars without facing the political and social cost of body bags. This shift has democratized conflict, making precision air power accessible not just to superpowers, but also to smaller nations and even non-state actors. Yet the greater, often unseen revolution lies in cyber warfare. This is the technological battlefield where national power is measured not by tanks or ships, but by firewalls and data packets. Cyber acts can cripple an enemy's infrastructure power grids, banking systems, transportation networks without firing a single shot, achieving strategic objectives that would have required massive bombing campaigns decades ago. A well-placed algorithm can stop an army faster than a missile. This form of warfare is instantaneous, deniable, and constantly ongoing, creating a state of perpetual low-intensity conflict between major powers. The final, terrifying frontier of this age is artificial intelligence, AI, and autonomous weapons systems. As AI is integrated into reconnaissance, targeting, and decision-making, the role of the human soldier is shifting from the operator to the overseer, and eventually, perhaps, to the observer. The integration of AI into warfare promises lightning-fast reaction times and a level of efficiency previously unimaginable. However, it also raises the profound ethical question of delegated lethality. At what point do we fully surrender the moral and legal responsibility for killing to a machine? The lesson of the algorithmic battlefield is that speed and data are the new heavy armor. In the 21st century, armies no longer fight for inches of ground. They fight for milliseconds of decision time and for control of the electromagnetic spectrum. The future of warfare will be fought in the silicon, the airwaves, and the server farms. From the simple wooden longbow that destroyed the night to the atomic bomb that forced mutual restraint, to the algorithm that now runs the battlefield, military history is a relentless, black, accelerating cycle of technological obsolescence. Every innovation is a desperate attempt to find an advantage, only to be neutralized by the next. The only constant is that the game will always change. And those who ignore the new technology will always become the casualties of the past.